that family was. So we made a phone call, and at that point we found the brother. We found that foster mom and dad of the brother, mom and dad.
A full brother.
He's a half brother. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but he's actually been adopted by this mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, mom and dad are still real interested in connections with Sophie. Then these folks have 4 of their own kids, and they have adopted 9 other kids besides this one.
Wow.
So what is that? 13 more. Oh, and then one of those has a boy. So there's 13 to, I'm going to say there's 13 to 18 people there. Well, this Sophie and her brother were adopted once, and the adoption was rescinded. But that grandparents of that family are still wanting to be part of, and they are still part of this little boy's life. So there's 2 grandparents.
Of the first adopted family.
The first adopted family. When she was about, I don't know, she was about a year old when she was adopted. They rescinded the adoption. On her brother when he was 4, and on Sophie when she was 8, at different times they rescinded the adoptions. So now she has 2 grandparents by that family. Well, the grandparents, the grandmother has a brother. And that man is just an exciting man, and he wants to be part of the family. So she has now an aunt, a great aunt, and a great uncle who have 2 more kids and who have kids of their own.
Hmm.
So now Sophie has this big family, and there's a few more people like that. And that's what we found for Soph, and as soon as Soph is able to socially function, and we can get these people through the home study and all of that kind of stuff, Sophie has a place to go live.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was one of our jobs as a CASA member, was when the child was taken from their home, that was what we were supposed to do, was find a safe place, and if it was a family member, all the better.
I guess in the definition of family, these wouldn't really qualify in the true definition of family other than the half brother. But you've extended your family definition to people that care.
They call that extended family fictive kin. It's F-I-C-T-I-V-E, fictive kin. And that can extend to social workers sometimes, it can extend to teachers, it can extend to people they've met at church. I don't know that one of our jobs is to find family for these kids in the very beginning. I didn't ever think that was part of my job as CASA until I started thinking about or finding out about Family Find. But I think now that Family Find is in place, that it is probably going to become one of your responsibilities, and you probably won't ever know that it wasn't.
Or doesn't CPS do that when they get
Now,
a place?
now they are, that is the first place they look is family.
Yeah.
And it's becoming a bigger and bigger mandate. For a long time, they didn't put kids with family because it doesn't fall very far from the tree.
So when you've made a reference a couple times to when these kids are socially able or they can't socially, what do you mean exactly?
We have kids, especially the kids that have been in the system a long time, have some types of mental illness or emotional development problems.
Attachment disorder.
Sometimes it's attachment disorder, sometimes it's PTSD, or is that the right order? I never can get all those letters in the right, but post-traumatic stress syndrome, or whatever it is. Anyway, some of those kids, we have one girl in the system that's diabetic. They cannot manage their behaviors well enough to maintain in a family. The reactive attachment kids, if they're put in a family situation, they're expected to attach to a mom figure or a dad figure. You know, that's just how our society does it. And sometimes that's extremely difficult for them. And so when they feel themselves getting close and they feel like they're starting to depend on, they do whatever they can do to make them mad.
And even in those cases, therapy doesn't
No.
help. It doesn't help in those cases.
Sometimes,
to-
you know, not, and I can't say that 100% of the time. But Sophie has such a disgusting habit that she does at will that when she starts to get close or somebody makes her really mad, she pulls this darn trick and nobody wants to be around her.
You're not gonna tell us what it is?
No.
Okay, I have a question. You talked about rescinding adoption. I didn't know you could do that.
It happens a lot.
Wow.
And it happens more with older kids, right, Bill?
The worst.
Even after the adoption's final?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You know,
We've
they-
had a lot of kids come back into care because of rescinded adoptions.
I wouldn't even
That's
rescind
the
it.
You
worst
know
thing
that
could
thing
ever
you said
happen to
about
you.
how
Dog shelter.
they'll get so close and they'll mess up? You know, I'm part native and married to a full-blood. And I couldn't figure it out for years because I didn't know anything about a reservation or anything, you know. And I couldn't figure it out why his siblings, every time they get so close to making an accomplishment, like graduating from college, they'd mess up somehow. And I couldn't to the life of me. And then one day it was like, boom.
They're afraid to be successful.
Yes. And then I started thinking more and learning more on my own about it. I mean, like one of them wanted to get sober and the family member said, oh, tell him to come home, we'll put him in the stove, in the oven. You know, if he wants to get sober, dry up. You know, so then I started thinking, wow. You know, it just,
The kids like Sophie have been so emotionally beat up that they don't feel like they deserve anybody to love them.
So how do you get them over that if therapy isn't helpful and you can't place them until they are more
What-
socially acceptable? I mean, how do you cross that?
You kind of just force family on them. That's kind of what we've done with Sophie. We're still at the point where she gets a phone call every week from the adopted mother of the birth brother. And they get to visit. Well, a couple months ago, when she was doing this disgusting habit that she has, the people at the group home where she lived said, well, we're going to take that phone call away. That's going to be the punishment, so that she won't do this because she wants the phone call, right? Well, the social worker happens to be really, really on board with this in this case. And her and I visited, and we came to the conclusion that that was not going to happen. Family doesn't go away when you're bad. You know, and I sat in that or that treatment team meeting, and I said, what do you do when your kid comes home with an MIP? Do you take his, do you take his family away from him? This isn't quite that bad of a habit, but it's a pretty disgusting. And so anyway, we have finally gotten to the point with the group home that you don't get to take her family away. Now you can restrict the visits to being at the group home or not, But you can't take the visits away. She gets a visit now every 3 weeks, and you can't take the weekly phone calls away. No matter what her behavior is, unless at the very minute the phone call comes in, she's in a therapeutic hold or something like that. You know, and then that's a different story, and she can take it later. But you don't take family away. At that meeting, I sat there and I said, when they were talking about it, I said, you know, she doesn't believe she has family, because every time we've gotten really close, something's happened. Either she's done it or something's happened with the family that they couldn't take her. I said, Sophie, do you think that this is going to keep going? Do you think you're going to have a permanent connection with your brother? No.
Of course not.
No. That's why it's really important for us not to let them use that. And we just continually keep her with family. And we're going to expand the family. In November, we're going to get beyond the brother and the mom. So,
When you said reactive, I thought I heard you say reactive attachment. Did you say reactive attachment or detachment?
reactive attachment.
But that's still the order, the terminology for what she's doing to avoid attachment.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that they call it RAD, R-A-D, reactive attachment disorder. And Intermountain treats a lot of kids with that.
Back on the situation with the home, in that case, is it the social worker and the CASA who are the final decision makers on whether a phone call is going to be withheld? Is that, it's out of the home's hands or is there a back and forth?
It was kind of a, it was,
Or is it a team kind
well,
of deal?
actually, the social worker is the guardian of that child.
Right.
So
Oh.
when the guardian tells the group home, the social worker tells the group home, you can't do that. And in some cases, we don't have social workers that are strong enough to stand up to the therapists and the treatment team people in the group home. They're getting better about that, and it's something that's coming from the top of the state down, is that we pay the bills. These are our kids. You will do some of the things that we say. You know, we've been kind of, we've acquiesced on a few of their demands. Like, I wanted to start family this month. You know, I wanted to do a pizza party or a dinner or something with more family. They said, well, she's been good for 3 weeks. Let's let her be good for another period of time, and then we'll expand it, because she's leveling out. She's accepting. Right now, she's accepting this level of connection. So let's not blow her up yet, because lots of times they do the same thing with their actual biological family or their fictive kin that they do in a foster family. They think Ricky, he did all kinds of crazy things after he found out he had family, because he was so scared to get close to them. You know, he ran away in the middle of the night and got hyperthermia and spent Christmas in the hospital, and, you know, it was just crazy stuff that he did because he was scared to be part of the family. And that happens to our kids that have been long-term care.
How do you approach these family members or people that you find that are like family?
The easiest way is a phone call. We put together a manual for Family Find, and there are some sample phone scripts and stuff in there. But you call them on the phone and you say, I'm Loretta Miller. I'm a CASA with the Helena CASA program. CASA is Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Kids, and I'm working with your granddaughter, niece, whatever. And we're trying to make family connections for her. She's got some questions about her family, and we're trying to find out about it. How big is your family?
That's gotta get tougher with cell phones, finding, if they have cell phones.
The cell phone numbers are still out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But it just, I mean, isn't there, I always thought it was really confidential that a child was even, you know, even was a ward of the court. And so I can understand if you're dealing, you know, with close family, but when it's something like adoptive grandparents of an adoption that didn't go through, is that, I guess it's a confidentiality question as to whether you
They
can
know
say
where the
anything
child
about
is.
it. Pardon me?
They already know where the child is.
Okay,
They
so
know
you're
that the
not-
child has been taken away. They know that the state has the child. You know, they're not in the dark. So when you say to them, "I'm working with Sophie," "Oh, where is she?" "She's fine. She's in a group home." They don't need to know where she's in a group home at this point.
Mhm.
But we're trying to find family connections. We have missed her all of this time. We've wondered where she is. We've wondered if she's okay. Those are the things that you hear very first.
Mhm.
It's not, you don't hear, "I don't want anything to do with that." You don't hear, "Don't call me back." You don't hear that kind of stuff. You hear the sadness.
So they're pretty receptive then.
Yes, I have not run into anybody that hasn't said, "Yes, I want to be part of that connection." I think John ran into a great aunt in Nevada that gave him some information but really didn't want to hands-on connect. I'm going to pass around a couple of things. We have a search person, group, whatever you call them. It's not actually a search engine on the computer, but we've made a contract with a searching company that will find family for us. We put somebody's name in, and within 24 hours, is it, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
Within 24 hours, we get a report back. This is what I had them do one on me to start, because we needed somebody to go through this and see what we would get back and how they're related. And they do a search. Most of the connections they do with this are done by address. So one of the addresses they have listed here for me is an address that I had about 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
So this
Where do
is,
they pick up this information?
well, it's out there.
Oh,
But I'm going to pass this around, and you can kind of look through it. That's what happens when you get a search. It is scary.
It's scary.
My-
From a personal standpoint.
There's no social security numbers or birth dates in there. They do. I think they do put social security numbers in there with the last 4 digits crossed off.
But when you give, are you giving them a child's name?
No, you're going to give them a
Parent's
parent
name.
name.
Okay.
Who would have an address history.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so when after you decide that you're going to do family find, I'm getting late, huh?
No, you're fine.
After you find or decide you're going to do a family finding mission on this child, you go in and search the file if you haven't searched the file. And John tells about going in to look at Ricky's file, and I'm going to tell you that I didn't go in and look at Sophie's file. But John said, I can mine the file and I can get names and we can start there, because that's really where you start, is with people that either the child gives you, you say to the child, I'm going to try to see if I can find some of your family. Can you give me some people? Or you do what we call a mobility map, and it helps the child remember where they've lived and who's important in their lives. But anyway, John said, I'll go in and mine the file. Go in and start looking for names in the file. He said, I sat down there and there were, I think he said, 3 file boxes about this long in his case.
Holy cow.
So he did some, and he found Grandma and a few other people, and he did. I don't think he went through it all, but I don't know. He's pretty diligent. He may have sat down and gone through all of it. John is the man who came the first night and told you what CASA is all about.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, John and I took the training with Kevin Campbell together. But We can do a search. This is the list that came out of today's paper with the obituaries. Do you know what's in an obituary? Have you read them?
Tons, yes.
It says surviving family.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
predeceased prior.
Yeah.
So these sometimes, depending on, if you know grandma just died not very long ago, there's a whole list of family. This one says, where is she? She's got a sister, 1, 2, 3, 4 sisters, 6 grandchildren, some great-grandchildren. The other day, I think there was about 30 people in one of those. One of the really tricky places that they look and that is open to some of the other searches is fishing and hunting licenses.
Oh, sure.
Some dads that are missing may not go get a driver's license for some reason or another.
But in Montana,
They'll get their fishing and hunting license. So there's all kinds of places you can start looking for family when you want to start doing that. When we found family, when we have, a half a dozen people, Kevin says you need to start with 3. If you find one that's in support, that's great. The genealogy people and, the Mormons do a lot of that. But they estimate that every United States person, every citizen, has at least between 100 and 300 living relatives. So how big was your family? She's got a big one.
Never ending.
I only considered people that I see.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you didn't, to me, you didn't give us enough time to begin to, at least for me, to hit that family, because I know a fair lot about mine hither and yon around the country. I had 27, and that was only direct ups and downs.
Right.
They're alive. So,
That's what mine are
yeah.
doing.
But I included close friends that I consider family.
So if we needed to find family for her, we have 200 people to put in her network. Because she thinks that they're important. There's that many people around that are important to her. So, we start pretty conservatively after we found family and we decided that there's some people that can make connections. We have a meeting with all of those folks. We have a meeting, and if they aren't local where we can see them, we have a phone system that we can use and get them on the phone. We've done one for a girl that we had everybody. It was a little boy. It was not a little boy. I think he's 17. But everybody was out of town. He is actually in Great Falls with a foster family up there. He's one of our CASA kids, but he's up there. So he was even on the phone. And in that case, he almost directed the meeting because it functions at a high enough level. We don't always get these kids that have bad behaviors. We get a lot of functional kids too. But he was cognizant enough, excited enough. He pretty much ran the meeting for us. But he had not talked to his mom. His grandmother was on the phone. His mom is deaf and she was not on the phone, but one of the sisters was. 2 aunts and uncles were, grandma was, and he had not talked to them in several years, like 6, 7, 8 years. They didn't know where he was when the Kara started to call him. And so we had a phone call. We'll follow that up soon. They scheduled cards and letters, pictures to come back and forth, so that and I'm not sure. Have we gotten any letters from anybody down there for Kara?
Yep.
Kara, because of Kara's situation, she wanted the cards and letters to come here. We often screen them before we send them on. I've gotten some from Sophie to go to her family that I did not pass on. After I read them, I thought, this is going to upset them, and this is not the time to pass this. I've saved them. At some point, they will go on. I've also gotten letters that are really touchy-feely from Grandma, and I have not passed those on to Sophie because she's not ready for that at this point. But those letters will cross at some point, and they will all get them. Or I will sit down, like some of the letters Sophie's written. At some point, I will sit down with her and say, do you really want this to go to Grandma? You know, are you in the same place as when you wrote that? Like, one of them says, I'm sorry I broke that window out when I was 8 years old, and that's what made me go into care.
Oh.
You know, that's not something she needs. She needs to work through that. But how would Grandma feel if Grandma got that letter? And right now we don't. Grandma's already
Blaming herself.
well, not blaming herself, but she's already touchy-feely. You know, poor kid. You know, so we don't need to go there
Do
yet.
you ask the child, you know, if there's anybody in their life that, you know,
Yes.
that's not an immediate, like a family, like a kin, I guess.
Right.
You ask them who would be important to them.
Yep. Who would you like to be in your network? Who would you like to get support from? Sometimes it's a teacher. Kevin considers the family network anybody who will be there for a child that is not paid. Because if you think about it, you as a CASA are the only person in some of these kids' lives that aren't paid to be in that child's life. So, so we start with a phone call. Sometimes the kid's involved, sometimes he's not, or she's not. Then we go to cards and letters, pictures, those kinds of things. Then we go to phone calls, and then we get to visits. And I'm actually hoping that Sophie doesn't have to spend the holidays in the group home. That we might be able to get her connected. If I can move somebody off center to get a home visit done, we may be able to connect her for a few hours. You know, maybe one night with the family, and I think that would mean an awful lot to her brother, because her brother also doesn't believe he has family. You know, the brother has gone through the same thing that Sophie has. I've got this sister, but I can't connect with her.
In other words, he doesn't see her as family, but
he's got the other family.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't. But he doesn't. He's
He
not
doesn't see her
connected,
as family,
and
right.
the only biological family his sister.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that maybe that my hope and dream for Sophie is that at least part of sometime during Christmas she can be with family. So, are there any other questions? I think I've told you most of what I know. And I can do it in less than an hour, you guys. That's good. Yes, ma'am.
We will work with you a lot as CASA.
I guess that's up to Bill. But if you're going to do Family Find with your kids, John or I, or both of us will work with you on Family Find.
And when would we know that we're gonna do Family Find?
I would guess that it'll depend on the case that you get, and it will be something that your mentor and Bill will talk about with you. But don't be afraid to suggest it.
Okay.
You know, if you think that these kids aren't going to have somebody else going on, be proactive. Say, you know, I heard about Family Find and training. Is this something that would be appropriate in this case?
Okay.
Or if you heard the child maybe mention something or someone.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes it's not totally appropriate. You know, sometimes we know enough family without doing all of this. But there are some times when you don't know. Like the little girl the 14-year-old girl that we started with last year when all she had is dad.
I bet most times there are family.
Most times there are.
Yeah.
You know, and you can sort through those, and then if you don't like what you find, then you go for
We need more.
Bring in the second street.
Did I miss anything? Did you want me to cover anything I didn't? Do you remember anything that I should cover?
I don't think so.
Any other questions?
This is extensive what they come up with.
My son-in-law's mother is on there.
Yeah, I saw that.
I said,
Nephew's ex-girlfriend?
well, see, one of the addresses I had, we kept the house after we moved out, and my nephew moved in there. And so he had, no, she didn't live there.
Oh.
But he connected an address with her before his address at my
So
house.
then it connected to him, which drew back to you.
Isn't that scary?
Wow.
I can find everything.
I'm just
Well, and because of some issues, Kara's mail for Brandon is coming here, and then she comes in, picks it up, sorts through it, and gets it on its way. But she, for personal reasons, she doesn't want to use her personal address. One of the other ladies is using her business address because she doesn't. I use my own.
So they don't give you names.
Oh yes, the name's
Why does it say
The
that?
thing that happened today, I'll just give you
See the
a
names at the
light
top of the
version of
list,
it, but,
and then they give you
this
all
is
their
a
addresses as you go at the top of it.
12-year-old boy, and
This
this
right
kid
here,
I
there's
think
a-
is
there's
about